What's going on, y'all? My name is Dexter Thomas, and this is another edition of Receiver. If this is your first time, welcome. Where you been? But welcome anyway. And I mean, it's weird because again, this is the 11th time we've done this, and when we first started this, we started this at the very beginning of quarantine when we didn't know what it was going to look like. We didn't know how long it was going to last. We knew that it was going to affect really every part of our lives, right? We knew it was going to affect how we went about our daily lives, how we communicate with each other, how we connect each other, and how we express ourselves. And I thought, and we were all thinking at the very beginning of that, who better to check in with than those people who are truly expressing themselves on a daily basis, right? And so check in with artists. And so now for our 11th edition of this, I'm really excited to have in artists who we've been listening to for a minute. Hopefully some of y'all are familiar with Gabriel Garzón-Montano. Thanks for being on, man.
Thank you so much for having me, man. I'm
Yeah,
admiring the gradient, that green. I haven't seen that before. That's
I
that's
appreciate you, man.
that's tremendous. See,
Yo, I
a
mean
man a man who
that's
knows
a
his low light plants, that kind of subtlety does not go unnoticed around here.
I won't lie, it was not premeditated. This was trial by fire, man. I brought in a lot of
Oh,
plants. I brought in some
don't
sunflowers
apologize
that
for your
last.
greatness with the plants. I have a few, and I'm like, yeah, you just gotta spend time. They'll talk to you eventually, right? Except for
Exactly.
that
Yo,
one, that tenuous.
yeah. Oh no, that's this one right here. That's the one right behind me.
Okay.
We have arguments, but
Oh.
let's get into some of the music. Well, first, man, how have you been? How is your art being affected? How are you navigating through all this right now?
Uh, at first, I was making a whole bunch of shit, and then I was making less, and then I started making a whole bunch of shit again. So, for me, it's been a tremendously sad and vital and energetic and expressive and productive and depressive and anxious and
Mm.
celebratory and transformational time. It's just really been like everything very intensely because of the way things slowed down.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there was this moment, and I think you'll remember this. There was this period at the beginning of quarantine where those of us who are lucky enough to be able to work from home, right, to have the kind of job and have the kind of income where we don't have to be out putting ourselves in danger. We don't, that's not a necessity for our lives, right? Um,
Mm.
Aside from, obviously there are people whose jobs require them to go outside and they have to be put in danger, essentially, to deliver food, to make sure things are working, to deliver mail, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
Where I think there were a lot of people where we were trying to find the silver lining, right? Where it was, okay, yo, quarantine, I'm gonna work on that project that I never did. I'm gonna write some poetry. I'm gonna get up every morning. I'm gonna work on that project. Have plants, whatever, right? And then I
Mm.
think at some point it turned into that silver lining for some people started to kind of disappear, right? And for artists, I remember talking to a lot of artists where it was, you know what? I'm just gonna be try to be ready for summer. This will all be cleared by summer. I'm gonna hit tour and we're gonna be ready to go. That's come and gone. And I wonder what that's been like for you because I've read and I've seen that you do tend to work in a solitary way, but
Mm.
now that that's sort of impressed on you, that's sort of forced on you. How does that affect your process? Because you said you slowed down a little bit.
Oh yeah, but that happens all the time. I heard that John
Mm,
Bryan will stay in bed for 3 months. And that he has a seasonal oscillation of his output, like to that degree, right? To that extreme. But yeah, I mean, my life has always been quarantine, right? As soon as I started taking my shit seriously, it was quarantine.
mm,
Truly,
mm.
and I just finished a record, right? So that was crazy because I was underground in the basement, just hanging out with the tape machine and some Pro Tools that I didn't know how to run. And no, but really, just only working on the project, and then yeah, getting ready to put it out, and getting wind of this notion of like there's no touring anymore and like all that, right? And I don't know though. To me, life feels like a dream all the time, right? And I can't believe so many things about what I see or what I've gone through. It's so
Mhm.
hard to even put them on a scale, right? Or even be able to replay all of them and like process them. That part gets to me.
Mhm.
That I have like it's like all these books that I'm buying that I'm like not reading, and I know that every day there's one of them that I will never read. That's about his
That's real
poem,
though.
but yeah, but that
Yeah,
that's a really crazy way of talking about age. When I read that, I was like, that's why poetry is the shit, right? Because like if you can come out with something like that, that's worth reading. Anyways, yeah, so
yes.
it's like that's what it starts feeling like. It's like, damn, it's still fast, or I'm still like three quarters, or whatever it is, right? This feeling of like being a human being, and like being like, I want everything, and it's still not enough.
Yeah. When did you start working on this album that's coming out?
Like, okay, it 2018,
Okay, so it's been a while.
yeah, coming out of the tour for Jardin or Jardin, um, I started making stuff that was way different, really ambient, just to try to
Mm.
like just rinse the palette and like feel fresh about it. And then I made trap music, and it was straight up a fruit salad cover that turned into that.
Sorry, it was a fruit salad. Say that again.
Right. I sang her vocal, and then I muted it, and then I started going. At first, it was Agüita mi niño, and then I started just saying the word over and over. And I did
Interesting.
that because I was
Interesting.
afraid to only have one word and to repeat it. Because I was like, that's too obvious. And then I was like, but that's precisely why that's what we're gonna do. And so it was like
Okay.
literally my whole limits became that. And I was like, let's play that game. And then when I was doing the ambient stuff, it was like just be as un LA as possible.
Okay.
Very
Okay. So
reactionary
this,
music.
yo, I love this. I love this. Yo, so for everybody who's in the chat right now, whether you're watching on Facebook or whether you're watching on YouTube, definitely feel free to jump in, ask questions or whatever. We'll try to add that in and get to that. But that brings me to the question, to the song that we're gonna hear in a little bit. But tell me a little bit more about that, this track Awita, because I feel like a lot of people have heard it, but I want to make sure that we really get into it. So you talked about that it's one word and it's a repetition of one word. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Okay. Awita's like a diminutive. It's like a pet name, a very cute way of talking about water.
Mhm.
Um, and it's like 60% of your heart and like most of your body. And then water is life, right? I couldn't think of a more relatable thing, you know? It's pretty
Mhm.
non-partisan issue. It's like air. And
Right.
so I was like, oof, wetness is the shit, right? Just like the whole, I was like, there's nothing that you could ever complain about besides when your basement floods. There's a couple other instances, but that's not what the song's about, right? And it's I wanted to just celebrate the Colombian Spanish. So like
Yeah.
obsessively, just filling it with these moments of like my favorite words that I heard growing up. And I speak like this, like 1990s Bogota Spanish. Like it's definitely in an era, right? And it's what I'm imitating from like being there with my father, summers,
Mm.
really like 3 months
Right.
at a time. So that
Yeah. So
song
so
is
this.
just me talking about American shit that I hear in rap music that I've listened to my whole life.
Yeah. So I want to get into this because, like you said, I want obviously water, diminutive, right? Of like cute way of saying water, but there's another slang meaning to it. Am I right?
It depends what country you're in. You know, things just change. It's parlances, state to state, country to country. Um,
Mhm.
Neighboring countries tend to have a lot of the Venn diagrams. Like, yeah. So,
Yeah.
what was the one that you had in mind, and what country?
Well, so from my understanding, is it a way? So there's water, right? Then there's drip, right? Which that is definitely in there, but that's obviously I mean, we can get into this, but that's obviously related to the English use of the word, the English slang use of the word, right? But Awita means it's something like, is it like cash? Am I reading that right?
Not in the way I'm using it. But
Okay.
for me it is wealth. You know, water is just wherever the water is, that's where the leaves are. I don't know. So that's where life is. But I'm sure it means cash. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. I'm pulling.
In what
Who knows where
Spanish
I'm
though?
pulling
Yeah.
I was
Well,
talking.
I do talk about the bag with Aretha, and like there's this moment where I'm just only talking about like money for a second, right before the last chorus.
Yeah. 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 Well, yo. So I want to get into how this is a trap song, and you've sent us a video that we're about to premiere right now that I'm really excited about. People know this track as a trap song, right? Awita is it's a trap song you've done, which is different from what I think a lot of people have come to expect from or are used to your music being. But you've done a really different version of this. Why'd you do that? Why'd you do it like that?
I made it up on the spot, and it was really just because that's the chords to Bloom.
Mm.
It's just the outro to Bloom. And because I liked that sometimes it takes me a while to find the first note. It's like hard for me to reimagine, like find my entry note.
Okay.
It's
Okay.
just a fun.
So
It's a
with
fun. It's like a poetic little loophole that I have of like chance and the possibility of like, you know how Jim Carrey used to go out and just not prepare any stand up and just get his ass handed to him and like learn some very valuable lessons. That's how my like some of my live performances are.
mm. So how do you
Like I'll even
think
have a
this
plan. I look at it. It's like I should do something else.
how do you
And
think
that's
this
what's
version of
happening.
Awita came out?
Say it again.
How do you think this version of Awita came out?
This one came out a lot more melancholy. And yeah, it's just recontextualized because you have this 2/5. It immediately it gives you this like old songbook feeling. So yeah, it's just calm.
Yeah.
It's not as like in it. I'm not
Yes.
really
Yes.
gunning for anything in this version. I'm just kind of like sitting by the water and like doing it.
We've we've built up to it enough. We built up to it enough. I want to get right into it. So let's watch it. Let's give it a look so everybody can see this one, what we're talking about.
Semejante gotita, agüita, agüita. Los que estamos activos movemos los pies, reneguito. Un pasito muy fino, y de flota divino. De mi mami le estilo todito caliente, me salto los tibios. Agüita, agüita, me llueven diosita. Las más finas ajitas me caen distintas gracias a la vida. Es que soy un berraco salvaje, pero suave chinchila. Me meto a rumba con tacones en pie, a veces me maquillan. Diferente la pinta, salpican gotitas. Agüita, 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 agüita. La lluvia bendita, las lágrimas limpias. Agüita, 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 agüita. Diferente la pinta, salpican gotitas. Agüita, 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 agüita. La lluvia bendita, las lágrimas limpias. Agüita, 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 agüita.
Okay, so we're back, and that was an acoustic version of Awita. And again, if you're just joining us right now, we are on receiver, and you're listening to Gabriel Garzón-Montano, or that's what you just listened to. And so that is a very different version of the track, or the version of the track that people are most familiar with. So it is much more melancholy. Can we get into the lyrics for a second though?
Yes.
Okay, I want to get into the lyrics and we talked about this a second ago, because some artists don't necessarily want to get really into the lyrics, which I respect. But if you're down for it, I want to do it.
They don't want it. You mean the ones they wrote and recorded? I guess so. No, it's true.
Hey man, hey, I respect it. But and again, if anybody who's watching, for everybody who's watching, and whether you're watching on YouTube or on Facebook, feel free to jump in with questions. We'll try to add those in. But I want to talk about the hook, right? The hook, because I feel like that's where the meaning of Awita really starts to break down, right? Because what is it? La lluvia bendita, right? Las lágrimas se limpian.
Yeah.
Right? So break that down for me.
La lluvia bendita is the holy rain, and then las lágrimas limpian is the tears clean.
Yeah.
It's implied that they're yours. It wouldn't be like the tears, but Awita, 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 Awita. And the first one is diferente la pinta. And pinta in Colombian Spanish means like your look, your get-up, your ensemble, your situation. So diferente la pinta, like I'm just like straight up, like that's gonna be part of like the claim to a brag, founded in just something that might not be understood, right? And salpican gotitas is the drip that you talked about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, what that does for me is, because that's where it starts to break down, because you break down in a good way, obviously, where you really start to break down all the different meanings of potentially in Awita, right? Because it's just, okay, water? Are you talking about water? And in the very beginning, you're using the phrase, you're using the word just droplet, right? And so, okay, maybe there's just water. But then it turns into drip, right? Swag, coolness, outfit, whatever. But then also you're talking about the water, the tears cleaning, right? And just all these different meanings come in, right? And I thought that was really hard, just because it takes it from you hear the beat and you assume, okay, there's gonna be somebody bragging about something, just talking hard, which is cool, nothing wrong with that. But then it gets a lot more melancholic in the lyrics. But then I noticed in the way that you do it in the acoustic version, that really draws that out for me.
Ooh. Right. The emotional bed that we're sitting in with the same text gives you a different directive emotionally. And that's where my whole job is. That's where I live. It's like the more I can control that, the better. And yeah, the cool thing about using water was like coming from the rain, then to your tears. The lyric used to be then that it went down to turn the seeds into something. And so just like guiding myself with that like physical direction of it actually falling and describing it that way, and just seeing how easy it was to work with it.
Yeah.
Once I got going too, it's like, oh, if I had only one more day to rehearse or whatever, I was like, oh, if I could just like write 3 of these right now. But yeah. And then the water comes out of you as sweat too. There's too many ways to talk about it.
There is, but that's kind of why I find that really interesting, specifically with how your new record, even your old stuff really, but your new record, which we can talk about in a little bit, works, because you're not only going back and forth in this song. I feel like you have to know Spanish to fully understand it, but you also have to know English, but you also have to know a particular versions of Spanish, right, that you're familiar with. But then you also have to know hip hop culture English. And so it's a good 4 or 5, you could say, languages that are happening in this record, where if you're not fluent in all of them, or if you're not at least familiar with all of them, not everything registers. right? Even the top, if you don't know the soccer players that you're talking about, what's his dude? Oh boy, with
the Scorpions.
Yes, the scorpion kick. I had to reread that one. I was just, is that guy? Yes.
The Rick James of Fuchibao. At Wembley when he does it, and then he just puts his hands up, and he's just dead serious. I love that moment. That kind of punk ass energy is what I'm trying to bring to my every situation, right?
Mm.
That makes
tell me about
good reading.
But tell me about that, because this is something where I feel like this really embodies where you are living. It's not one language or the other or the third. It's kind of an all of the above moment where it's everything.
Yeah, and I'm having to celebrate moments that I know are in between, but that to someone represent some version of some possibility of the epitome of something, right? It's like everyone centers the parts of you that they see in themselves, and then have them play with one another based on like their awareness of the ways they could. And that's it. And that's the way like all of us are going to see the cultures and the different peoples. And then yeah, it's been wild for me to just think about like what it is to like make sound, you know, and how you get to the kinds of sounds you make. And how it's almost assumed that you wouldn't do anything else, right? The underlying discussion there is chasing, you know, that cheese.
Underlying discussion is chasing what?
Hanging at the end of the wheel.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
like, otherwise I'd be sitting around playing on a keyboard, like, just having fun, making sound. There's no way anyone's paying me to do that. That's its own reward. But then, you know what? For Prince, that's where he comes in. Because the way he organized that and had it live side by side with this like consummate professionalism and like total understanding of the game and just everything about it, right? Just pre-production 101.
Yo, it does feel like, specifically with the new record that you have coming out on the 2nd, that there is a difference, even a personal difference. And can you tell me about what was that process like, moving from your old material that people are familiar with and creating this new body of work?
It was so fun. It was just like, finally. Like, I just felt like I had control. Like, I could cool on something if it was bothering me too much. Mm-hmm. I knew I was going to get to the end of it. It was the first time I knew I was actually going to do it. So the other ones I had, like, well, the other was just like, had situations where I was coming up against the limit. And my stubborn ass was just like working with it. And so this time I just felt way more in control. Mm-hmm. Way more decisive, like about like what makes an aesthetic tilt a certain way and like what's gonna make it really be class. Like I background vocals are a big one for this record.
Really? Tell me about that.
Well, on Hadin, I just did a lot of them, like a lot of them. You know, I tracked those in the Pro Tools. And on this one, if I was tracking a tape or Pro Tools, I would limit myself to, I think, 6 tracks for backgrounds.
Really? Limitation on purpose?
Yeah, because when you listen to the classic records, you can't find more than that.
True.
And then a lot of the times, parts that people would double nowadays are sung single, and that's why they sound so fucking ill. Because you hear the individuality, and like when you hear an old doo-wop song, and someone's like, "I'm still in love," and they're like right there, and it's all like, if that was you, you'd be like, "Oh, turn them down," right? But you're just like, "Oh, it's just vulnerability," when it's not you, right? It's kind of like how it should.
Well, yo, I want to also talk about, I want to come back to something that you mentioned a second ago, which is the in-between part, right? Because especially with your new record, and I hope you don't take this the wrong way, I think there you could be, you could, well, wait till I say it, but I think you could be forgiven for if somebody came over to my house, right? I put the record on, right? I could imagine somebody saying, yo, that's a dope playlist. Give me that playlist. If you're not really paying attention, you might not realize that this is the same guy. This is the same music. It feels intentional though.
Yes, it is. It is intentional. The desire was to make 3 artists, thinking that
3
like, that
artists.
would be pretty hard to do. Yeah.
Okay.
One who expresses in this like post Beatles XL world with like Radiohead, the Beatles, these references. Going into Iceland with Bjork, right? New music in the 20th century, musique concrète. Just like that whole canon of just 20th century performance art, classical music, the whole culture. Modern dance, John Cage and Merce Cunningham, those, all that. Then you have R&B dude, debonair leading man. And, you know, he loves Sly. He loves George Clinton. He loves Prince. He sees the line between Ray Charles and then Sly, who with Billy Preston has a band called Sons of Ray. And then it goes down, keeps going to vocally especially, then Prince and D. You see the preservation of like this thing that only someone with that capacity could carry. And for me, it's just the funkiest shit ever. So like for me, it's like taking those instincts and like really knowing why he wasn't gonna bend this note or do any of the other things, right? And that's it. That control. And then you have this kid who's just talking a bunch of shit and making music that moves.
And who are we hearing on Awita?
You're hearing this guy that you're hearing Gabriel, you're hearing a hitmaker right there. That's me going as hard as I can against the wall, right? And really like not leaving anything unturned. There's one line in there for me, but it felt very balanced when I finished it. I had this like really peaceful feeling with that. And there's already a blueprint, you know? It's not like you're just sailing off into the sea, like not knowing what's gonna happen. You know where you're gonna take your fall. You know, like why, if you don't jump up and down when it's playing, you can't put it out. The other music that I put out that people love, I haven't really known. With that one, I was sure. Yes.
Really?
Yes. Like my first EP.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, I put that out like 2 years after I finished it. Yeah. So it's like the objectivity is crazy. How many metas and micros there are.
Wow.
I'm telling you that I get lost in that, right? And my whole claim to myself is that. Yeah. And yeah, but I manage it beautifully, I think, when you go A, B, C and you can't tell it's the same person. And you still actually want to listen to that music. And for me, it's so strange to look at that as a true expression of myself. But I'll see what the next one is, but yeah. It's curious to me. I'm discovering it with you, right? I thought about it for 3 years.
You mentioned Sly, you mentioned Ray Charles, you mentioned a bunch of artists. So this might be where I have to ask a little bit about your background, because I definitely hear some Prince in there. But I've also read that you picked up a lot of funk when you were younger. Tell me about that.
I was starting at age 19. I was going to SUNY Purchase, and we made a band. And me and my boy Davey, we just transcribed George Clinton, Prince, Sly, all that stuff. Really, it was Fred Wesley's arrangements, you know? The thing that we would mostly transcribe, like, on the paper was all the horns. We learned all the guitar parts and the bass parts, and yeah.
What were you listening to as a kid that brought all this influence into what you're doing today?
My mother was a mezzo soprano, so it was a lot of old music from the Western classical canon, and then like really old music. And then she would sing like the Messiah at church, during Christmas, and she was a freelance singer in the city, right? And she liked going to Stone. Prepared piano was normal for me when I was like 7. So it was insufferable. So yeah, or like when she was singing, at white church, I would just be under the pews, just like gathering all the dust on my clothes and then coming out like kids shit. But that was like my attitude towards this music that I didn't realize was just. I'll sing things that I have no idea what they are, but I know there's something, and they're long passages of just music, right? And it's all coming. It's a lot of memory. There's tons of memory, and I think that's why the music is all me, because it was my mom really showed it to me and lived it, and so we're hanging out too, so it's intense.
Did you find yourself rebelling against your mom, the music your mom was performing, and saying, "I want to do my own thing. I don't want to do what you're doing"?
Oh hell yeah! I want to be a rock star.
Did you know that when you were young?
30,000 a year, like that. But she was doing great. With 2 kids. Mm-hmm. So I didn't rebel against it. I was so in awe of it. I loved it. I would try to imitate her and just make fun of her with Luna, and we'd be like, "You're flat," this and that. I don't know, it was just music. The rebellion was, I think, against practicing.
Against practicing?
Yes. Like the things that people told you to, right?
I dig it.
I'm really grateful someone didn't tell me to you should really transcribe Roses, the intro, the piano intro, because I did it, and it took me forever back in the day. That was one of the first complicated pieces of music that I learned, besides the violin stuff, on the keyboard. But when I was 12, I was expected to play Ray Charles, and my mom was like, "Come on, man!" When I couldn't connect it with a diminishing chord.
Wow.
So I was definitely scared.
What then was your first real interaction with hip hop then?
It was Ready to Die.
Biggie. Okay.
And literally, I knew that was it. As soon as I heard it, I was like, "Wow, okay."
You want to do that?
I just remember feeling like I just had to go sit down somewhere and just be like, okay. And I remember just loving how I always imagined this chewing gum or a basketball or something, bouncing and sticking to all the parts of the beat, and just in as if he was putting butter on something, and it was connecting everything. And I remember I hadn't heard voices sound like that. It was, when I go back and try to recreate it all and see the lineage of that really fluent post rock him Nas, the thing you associate with stuff starting around then. I'm sure there's pockets of it, but for me he was so different, and he felt like my friend, and I had no idea what he was saying.
Wow. Damn, that is.
And a lot of the references are from the '80s, in Biggie's music, right? So it's just things that I was just repeating phonetically. But a lot of people are like that. They're like, "Oh, I love so and so," and they don't know the lyrics, right? And it's this whole other. Your body just gravitates to it, and you dance to it with your mouth in a certain way by kind of saying the lyrics. People go their whole lives thinking a certain lyric is another thing. It's beautiful. It still means the world to them, and they haven't even, perhaps, let it unfold. It just stays in a zone, and it fulfills a purpose, which is more than enough.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that's what I feel listening to a lot of your music. Is it feels a lot like somebody who's just been steeped in all these disparate kinds of music, but is putting it together. There's a musician who goes somewhere, who flies somewhere, and spends some time there and says, "Okay, bet, I got it. I can do this," and then incorporates that. You dig? But then there's something else about somebody who's actually been steeped in it and grown up in it. And I feel that in your music, where there's all these disparate things, and then you just kind of do all of them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think it's the ear. You know, I always had a big ear, and I always like to like repeat things, and that's that.
Gotcha.
And after you repeat it for a while, I guess it makes it yours. But does it? You know, that's the other thing.
I mean, who owns it, right? Who owns any of this?
That's what I'm asking.
Who owns any of this? Yeah, because
Right.
I mean, speaking of that, there's the other line. There's the other line in Awita, right, where you're saying in Bogota they're listening to Migos, and what is it? In Atlanta they're listening to Toto, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to break that down for me because
Sure.
is that based in real life? Because I'm wondering, did you run up to people in Atlanta listening to Toto? So is that what happened?
Yeah, I mean, my Colombians are there too. They're bumping cumbia. I'm just showing you how it's like these vibrations. I'm not showing. It's just like a thing that knows, but it's curious to think of it that way. And it's just me letting the listener in on like, here are the ingredients at play. There's cumbia in here. You know, there's Migos in here. Like this is what allows me to even have insight. It's just my love of that expression.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's the like you said, the in betweenness of the interplay between the phrase, Awita, between, Atlanta and Bogota, right, where people may not realize there's a connection, and then I think also the masculinity and then the not so macho ness of the track as well, right? Because you come in and the beat's hard and you're expecting, all right, somebody's gonna be talking about some really hard stuff, and then you come in saying, "Oh, I got the style from my mom." Oh, okay. Which
Aren't we
again
all
feels,
imitating
I
our
mean,
mom? Aren't we all just imitating
what's
our
up?
mom? Like, aren't we all imitating our mothers? Straight up.
But when
And
is the
our
last
fathers.
time you heard a rapper say that?
Sorry?
But when's the last time you heard a rapper say that though?
I don't know. I think Tupac's the most famous example.
Definitely.
But yeah, there it is.
There it is. Shoot.
But you know
Yeah.
what?
So
If you like, on that topic though, there's a real if you think about like the mindset of each song, and you listen to Lil Baby's last song, the things that he acknowledges about human relationships, and like how far into actually like very calmly just presenting something that is not being, he's not trying at it at all. It's like something that's been coexisting. And it's just like, you see somebody who's showing a certain side of them to a very specific end, right? That's beautiful. But like, yeah, I mean like, that's something that Jay knew. I always reference that. He like really wanted to downplay the literacy and appearing a certain way, right? So what I do, by just giving you everything, it's like the ultimate no-no. But it's the contribution because it's like, what are we doing out here? Pretending what? Either you fuck with it or you don't, right? It's me. Or it's not.
did you ever feel like as an artist you were having to pretend to make people understand what you were doing?
Yeah,
Really?
totally. Yeah, I was doing music in a very certain context. And I was loving it. But like I didn't, you just don't think about it. And I'm like, wait, I could do anything. That's exciting. That's it. So I started doing that.
Yeah.
I'm doing a
Straight
salsa
up.
record with Kanye next.
And that you say that process kind of happened in the creation of this album then for you?
I think I've always like had things in the tuck, like secretly, that I was like, experimenting with and trying, or like voices I would only make alone in the studio. Yeah, and like I look at all my little kids and I go like, okay, you're definitely going to school today. You're staying back, or whatever it is, Like bad analogy, but you have to. You're like communing with these things that have their own lives, and then you categorize and sort through them, and those are your ideas and your concepts.
There are now, I think, 3. Well, if you count the colors performance, I suppose 4. But there are now 3 versions of Awita now, 3 videos.
Yes.
There's the original video, there's the lyric video, and there's the acoustic that we just saw. Which one's the real one? Which one's the definitive version of Awita?
Oh, the record. The record.
The record?
It's all about the energy on the record. Whenever it's being sung, that's what it is. But yeah, I love that record.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, man. I gotta be real with you. My favorite is the acoustic. After having heard the acoustic, I think that's my favorite right now.
It gives, yeah, and it's like transitioning into a new space with a familiar thing, like completely new context with it, right? Which is, but it shows you what we can do with the other songs, and it can go any way.
Okay, so now I want you to do the
through that we can give ownership to anybody of things that they wouldn't understand through barriers, culture or language, which is really exciting.
Yeah, nah, because like I said, for me, you said it makes it more melancholy. For me, I feel like it takes the barrier down, the acoustic version, for really getting into the melancholy aspect of that song, right? Where if you weren't really paying attention, if you just let the lyrics kind of pass you by, here you really have to pay attention to it. It's just, oh shoot, let me listen to what he's saying, because maybe I didn't hear it the first time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's why I appreciate it, that version.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's reharmonized. It just gives you a whole new feeling.
Yeah. Well, yo, but so it is, but I dig it. I definitely dig it. So yeah, so you have an album coming out on the 2nd. What should your listeners expect?
A tasting menu. You got A, B, C. And I wanted to call it a soundtrack.
Really? Okay.
Because that was the first thing. I was like, what would the closest example of a collection of songs that like have this amount of, the disparity here? And I was like, oh yeah, like when I used to get like the soundtracks to movies.
Okay, like, what's the movie?
What if this is not a record? What if it's a movie?
Okay, what's the movie? What's the movie about? What's the plot?
Well, I didn't get that far, but it's definitely me doing whatever I want to do, right? And I think in my private life, that's been something that's been missing, right? And so like it gave the music a force, and it gave my feeling of just picking up an instrument and like interacting with it. Just opened everything up.
Yeah. It does sound kind of like that. It does sound kind of like this record has been for you, kind of therapeutic, really.
Yeah. Oof. Just things I've been wanting to do my whole life. Yeah. Very therapeutic. I had so much fun making it. I was recording multi-tracks in a day just by myself, and it was the first time that I knew I was just going to do it.
Oh.
Hitting the snare drum that hard for 5 minutes when you're not really a drummer, but you want your song to sound that dope, it's a different experience. It's like you're holding on. And you get to the end and you're like, and all that energy gets left on the tape. And that's why I do it. Because you can literally hear it all stacking.
Yeah, man. Well, yo, I think I'm out of questions. Anything you want to ask me? Or anything we missed? Anything you want to get in there?
Yeah. We must have missed the point, right?
I don't know if we missed the point.
What is the point? No.
What is the point?
The point is that you can do whatever you want insofar as you're respecting the shit that you're commenting on, right?
Where's that line for you?
If I love something or it makes an impression on me, I have to learn it. And if I don't, I see the train moving, right? and I just become like a combination of all my favorite things. But that doesn't mean that always has to be on one song. You don't have to write every song every time. You can take thin slices of your experience and then like see what those are about. And they have nothing to do with one another, and that's okay.
That is kind of that weird conversation that seems to keep popping up, right? About, quote unquote appropriation, right? What is respecting something? What is contributing? What is taking? I mean, you're somebody who's pulling inspiration from all over the place.
Right.
Is that something you think about? Like, how do I make it clear that I respect this, or you just do it?
If you heard it, it's because I think that it is. And if it's not, that's why I love these discussions. Like, where the public can interact. But so far, everyone's loving it. I love it. It took me 3 years. Yeah, 10 songs, 3 years. So it's like, it just felt right, But I had to learn how to do three things.
3 different people, 3 different artists.
Oh yeah, I wanted it all to be the same thing, but then I was really bored with that. So yeah, tired of being bored.
I mean, you gotta. If we're gonna be in quarantine, you gotta avoid the boredom somehow, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just playing by different sets of rules that have hard limits. I love that. It's just like making everything a soup all the time is just so lame. It's like a couple ingredients.
I dig it. Well, yo, so I'll throw one last question at you then before we get out of here. So when your album drops again on the 2nd of October, right? How do you want people to listen to that? Where do you want people to be? What do you want them to do? What's the mindset for people to listen to your new song, new album?
I think you have to see yourself in it. There's something for everybody. Just ignore it or bang it loud or do whatever you gotta do. There's a lot of love in there.
Dig it. All right. Gabriel, thank you so much for being with us again, everybody. Thanks for hanging on the chat and watching. This has been Receiver. We'll do this again. Gabriel, we should do this in real life at some point. But until
Definitely.
then,
Are you in Brooklyn?
I'm in LA, man.
Oh, well, here we are.
I'll be out there at some point. But yeah, let's get up. But
Probably when we get off FaceTime.
Let's go. But yo, so everybody, thanks for tuning in. Appreciate y'all, and we'll be on here again soon. Peace.
Thank you. Have a good one.